Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a homeowner association threatened to hurt my wife and kids, and I did the only thing necessary to get rid of them. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. The title story starts like this. I know that most of the really bad HOAs take place in the United States because from what I can tell, they have more freedom or are less regulated. Here in South America, at least to my knowledge, they have a lot less power on things they can and cannot do. The problem is when they just don't care and wanna act like they have more power in the hopes that the members won't know any better. And in my neighborhood, where I would say at least half are over 50 and susceptible to that kind of thing, it really works. I was part of the HOA, but it was not exactly my choice. I moved into an already established one and it was just part of the deal. I did not even think anything of it because most of the time that just means an HOA fee and not really seeing or hearing from them. Money going towards community-run things and that's it. They cannot really make extra rules that you need to follow or force people to do whatever they want. As long as what you as a homeowner are doing is legal, then you should not really hear from anybody. And if not, the police are the ones you will be answering to. Since I'm writing this, I guess you can imagine that my HOA was not like the others and wanted to act totally outside of the boundaries of what it could and couldn't do. Now this story actually has a little mini story of me trying and failing to get them shut down before the main event kind of story. So about a year and a half after moving in the HOA kept calling and trying to tell me that there was a problem with my car. They said that it was too old and I needed to either make it look better or get a new one. I use my garage for storage, so I couldn't just put the car in there and hide it away from view. I did not listen to them because the car was fine by the standard of the government. It was legal for me to drive and nothing was wrong or broken on it. They had zero rights to complain or take any action against me. Well, they did anyway, and I guess they have a tow company they work with for when actual illegal cars are parked on the streets. So they came to tow my car, and after I tried to make them stop, they just told me the HOA said that it needed to be towed away. I don't mess around with people and just called the police right away to report the HOA basically just stealing my car. They came and spoke to me too, as well as the HOA. Now, the HOA was claiming a totally different story, saying they did not know the car was mine and it looked to them like it was just abandoned, agreeing with police to have the tow company bring it back to me. Playing the entire thing off as an accident when in reality I knew that they were trying to send me some kind of sick message or scare me. However, it didn't work, but what it did do was piss me off to the point that I wanted them to get some actual repercussions. Filing a police report would not do a thing because I had no proof it was intentional, and the police on the scene basically told me to just let it go, that I got my car back and there was no point in pursuing things legally. Fine, so I went around and tried to get a petition started to either shut down the HOA or remove the person in power. Being new to the neighborhood and the only one at the time that had a serious issue got me ignored and the whole thing fell flat. Fast forward to about 2 years ago and the HOA had made more enemies. They pulled smaller stunts on other neighbors and were just starting to get cocky and act like they ran everything. Again, tricking the older people into thinking they had more power than they actually did. They would ask for something by means of pretending it was a rule, and unsuspecting people would obey them. A pretty bad storm hit during the summer, and I'm talking about people losing their roof, trees falling, power loss for a couple of weeks type of storm. Not the worst, but enough to heavily affect everybody within the HOA for the most part. Almost nobody was prepared for something like this, but I had lived in areas with bad storms being common before and was ready. I was the only person with a generator, so I was the only one with any power in my house. Although I was using it sparingly for only the essential things. About 3 doors down from me, there was this couple that my guess would be having them about the oldest couple in the neighborhood. They came knocking on my door the day after the storm because with a generator, it makes noise and there's no real hiding it from people. And honestly, they just wanted a very simple request. I don't want to use real names, so I will just call them Maria and Carlos. Maria, excuse me, I noticed that you have a generator giving your house power. Carlos, we were wondering if your refrigerator was cold. Me, yes it is. Maria, I take insulin and the doctor says I'm supposed to store it in the fridge. I was wondering if maybe you had a room to put these in, and that I could come by a few times a day and get what I needed. Carlos, we would not normally ask, but the storm really banged up our house. A tree went right through the window, and we are worried about the medicine getting too warm. Now, these were some of the nicest people in the world, and in my mind were asking for the bare minimum. I was not gonna let them stay in a house with a tree inside of it and needing to walk to my house to get medicine. It was not a far walk, but they were old and could not even walk great. I double checked with my wife and decided to let them stay in our spare bedroom for a few days. They did not even really act like guests, but instead grandparents who came to visit. Maria decided to make herself at home in the kitchen, making food with our limited power that I did not know was even possible. Carlos was telling stories to my 2 boys and they were enthralled every second. They did not need to do any of this and it was extremely wholesome. Only them staying with us is kind of important to the story, but I felt like we all need in this world to be reminded that good people do also exist. It was also no secret that they were staying with us because secrets just don't happen during a time like this. People are outside and see things and talk to people, and before you know it, the world knows. And the HOA of course got a hold of this information, and instead of thinking that I was a good person or something, they decided that I was being greedy. The main HOA person showed up to my door and knocked until I answered it. I'm not friendly with them and I refuse to put on a fake voice and pretend that I am. So I said, "What do you want?" HOA, we heard that you have power in your house and are letting people use it. Me, I have certain things being powered in my house, yes, and I'm not letting people use it. HOA, we heard Maria and Carlos are here. Me, yes, as guests. They are not using my house. HOA, well, we need a place to hold a meeting tonight and this is the only house with lights. Now, the lights are something I've not been powering as I don't consider them essential. I don't know when we are getting power back and fueling the generator is not exactly cheap. I tried to explain to them that very thing, but it was just going in one ear and out the other. He kept claiming that he needed to hold the meeting in my house and that the generator needed to power the lights. Me, I'm not inviting you in my home. I don't want you near my wife and certainly not my kids. HOA person, oh no, you would not be able to be there. It's a private meeting. You would have to stay all at maybe Maria and Carlos's house for the night. So yes, they wanted me to take my family from our home and go into a home that was so unlivable in the current state that the owners were sleeping at my house. Me? No. Thanks for stopping by though. I tried to close the door, but he held out his hand to keep it open. HOA guy, maybe I wasn't clear. I was not asking to use it. I'm telling you that the HOA needs this house and you have to vacate. It's not an option. Me, listen to me carefully. You might be able to trick some of these other people by pretending that you have rights that you actually don't, but I know that you have 0 rights to kick me out of my own home. And if you try to remove us by force, I will make sure that your HOA meeting happens in a jail cell. I forced the door closed and went back into the house where Carlos asked what all the commotion was about. I told him and he agreed that the HOA were full of power-hungry people that acted way outside of their rights. He told me to stand my ground against them and I was the good person in the situation. They did not need my house to have a meeting and they just wanted to be indoors with power and figured they could try and strong-arm their way to getting it. One thing I hadn't been powering was my security camera, but I had a feeling that this whole thing was not over and decided to turn it on for the night. Turns out that it was a smart idea because they did come back as a large group to try and demand that we leave. None of us were even in the home and instead in the backyard. Carlos showed me how to set up a makeshift fire pit that was safe and we could cook some food over. The kids loved it and acted like they were camping in the woods. It was not my preferred type of thing, but honestly, anything that gives them those huge smiles is something I will look on fondly. They came into the backyard and the same guy as before from the HOA was leading the charge and holding a baseball bat. He was trying to look intimidating, but I had a good 4 inches and 50 pounds on him, so he did not scare me at all. Instead of me though, he walked up close to my wife and kids. HOA guy, I bet you would leave if I decided to use this bat on them. Your wife and kids wouldn't look so pretty then, huh? Unless you actually think standing your ground is worth more than your family. I am the absolute wrong person to mess with when it comes to you threatening my family. I'm the person to act first and unluckily for him, I keep a gun on me. And for those wondering, yes, it's a totally legal gun. I pull it out and shoot him right in the leg so that he cannot hurt my family. The rest of the HOA people go running as this guy is on the ground screaming. Carlos, Maria, my wife and kids all ran inside while I stayed out. I knew the cops were gonna get called after a gunshot was heard, and I did not want to give them any reason to think that I was dangerous. I put the safety on my gun, put it down somewhere visible and out of reach from either myself or the HOA guy. Then I sat down with my hands visible until they arrived. I calmly told them where the gun was and confirmed that I shot the guy in the leg. I was handcuffed, which I assumed would happen, but I was not scared since I knew that I actually did not do anything illegal. They had to follow protocol for safety and I just let it happen. Now, of course the HOA guy was gonna lie and say that I came after him with a gun like some crazy maniac, that he was just going from a walk when I forced him over on my property, threatened him with the bat and then the gun. And then to make matters worse, I apparently shot him for no reason. I explained what really happened, and it didn't take long for not only my wife but Carlos to show up as well to say their side of the story, as well as bringing the security camera footage to show that he was the instigator of the situation. Now, I had no idea what Carlos had done in his life before retiring, but lo and behold, he actually was a police officer. And some of the more senior staff there knew who he was and listened to what he had to say. They believed him that I was defending myself, as the tape also showed that the HOA trespassed with the bat and was threatening my family. I was let go, and this HOA guy was really unhappy when he found out that not only was he in the hospital, but he was also being charged with trespassing and assault. Since only the reasonable threat of violence is enough to be considered assault here. He was demanding that I be arrested and furious when he realized no charges were being pressed against me. That what I did was considered defense and protection of my family and home. Luckily, the shot was enough to keep the rest of the HOA off my property, and the kids and Maria had no trouble on their own. Aside from the boys being a little scared from Dad getting arrested, it took a lot of careful explaining to them about what I did and why it was right, and also that they should never touch guns themselves. The HOA dude got persecuted but was only given a minimal sentencing. I think the judge might have considered him getting shot as a lesson kind of learned. The only other thing that was that he was not allowed to be part of the HOA anymore. I did not want some other crazy idiot taking over right where he left off, so once again I went around trying to get people to sign a petition to get rid of the HOA once and for all. Only this time I was better known and had the support of Carlos behind me. I got enough people to sign where an emergency meeting was called. The HOA was dissolved and no longer exists in my neighborhood. A lot of people either had their own issues or were so disgusted by what happened to me, they wanted the HOA gone as well. After the whole shooting fiasco, the power returned to the neighborhood, so if they had just gone home and left me alone, they would have been fine by the next day. But also still running the place. I wanna say what happened was better, but I would always prefer the scenario that does not involve my family in danger. Also, Maria and Carlos were able to get their house repaired and move back in without any issue. As like a bonus side effect, we kind of just have them in our lives now. They always come by with food and over the holidays get my kids toys. I learned that they don't really have kids or grandkids of their own, so we are more than happy to be a stand-in family. We invite them once a week for a Sunday dinner, even to this day. I got the gun for protection, but never thought that I would ever need to use it. I'm just glad that I did not hurt him too badly or end up with the police thinking that I was at fault. I probably would not ever advise you to shoot somebody in that situation, because in some places it would still be illegal. So basically, check where you live if you are not sure, and if you can try and call the police to handle things, it might be better. Anyway, it was a scary night that I don't want anybody else to need to go through. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would say this guy really knows how to deal with HOAs. However, I'm curious, if it was you in that situation, what would you have done? Would you have taken the same steps as OP? Let me know in the comments. And the next one is a revenge story. My sister lives in a more rural area and has recently been plagued with having her mailbox smashed in twice in 1 month. Someone was playing mailbox baseball and she was one of the victims. She asked for my help and was worried about staying within the law to protect herself. I told her that we could figure something out, so I went to Home Depot and purchased 2 identical steel mailboxes, the traditional kind with the rounded top. I took one mailbox and glued a layer of foam underlayment to the inside. I filled it with concrete, making sure to add the appropriate rebar with a curved handle sticking out of the end. Once everything was set, I cut off the outer mailbox shell and used a torch to burn off the foam underlayment still stuck to the concrete. What was left was a slightly undersized concrete plug that would perfectly fit in the second mailbox and that could be inserted and removed. You see, my sister is afraid of snakes. By inserting the concrete plug into the mailbox at night, it would give her the peace of mind that a snake cannot go into her mailbox. I installed the second mailbox, informed my sister how the anti-snake concrete plug worked, and explained that the best time to put it in the mailbox would be at night. Strangely enough, one morning, there was a mark on her new mailbox and a bunch of small glass pieces along the road. Hypothetically speaking, it was the kind of glass produced by someone swinging a baseball bat, having it bounce back off of a mailbox, and smashing a car window. On a positive note, her mailbox has remained snake-free. And yeah, right, stars, that was a brilliant petty revenge. I just love these revenge stories revolving around mailboxes. And by the way, I can kind of understand the fear of the sister in this story. Sometimes if you put your hand in a dark mailbox, you don't really know what is inside, and sometimes I think maybe there's a spider or something. Also, funnily enough, there's another fear revolving around snakes that I have here in Thailand, but it is quite different. So a while ago, for some reason, there were a lot of news stories, more like 1 or 2 every month, about someone having a huge snake in their toilet and the snake then biting you in the ass. Nowadays, I don't see that many news stories revolving around that topic anymore, thankfully, and I suppose most of these stories probably happen in a more rural setting, and I live in kind of a bigger city, so I don't think it's that common here. But still, when I can, I usually go to the toilet that's on the 2nd floor.
The next one is titled, Company Saves Money and Then Gets Screwed. About 6 years ago, I worked for a power supply company in the UK. I worked in a small team that coordinated all the major company's infrastructure projects, and the role required traveling to meetings all over the country. We would average around 800 miles a week in company miles over the year, depending on time of year and location of projects, etc. Someone in the finance department had reviewed our expense claims and calculated that over 1 quarter we'd not covered the required number of company miles to meet the company's policy on company cars. For that 1 quarter, without looking at any other data, we lost our company car entitlement, and the company told us that we had to return the fleet company at the end of their leases. Malicious compliance activated. As we were project engineers, we had a very particular set of skills for knowing how to follow rules to the letter and how to do so in a manner that benefited the company or project or individuals. Usually, if it benefited the company, it benefited all involved parties. This was not one of those occasions, though. We pay benefits in kind tax on our company cars in the UK. The rules around this change as when the government feels like it. My team had all carefully chosen our cars to be zero cost to ourselves by choosing cars that were below the allowance of £300 per month, so the remaining allowance covered the tax obligation. We would all be screwed by the benefit in kind tax charges that year, and we're now paying tax. So, for starters, we reviewed the company car policy and found the company had no way of stopping us handing our cars back with immediate effect, whilst the company was still responsible for the leases. So, we made all arrangements for personal cars and handed our keys over at the next team meeting. We had also reviewed the company travel policy. We started using hire cars and trains for traveling. Trains and hire cars in the UK are not cheap, as none of us were willing to use our personal cars and claim the 50p per mile. Usually we would work a long day and book a bit of overtime or Leo to drive to and from meetings without staying over, as we would prefer to be at home even if it meant getting home late. That stopped with immediate effect. We would only work the mandated 7.5-hour day and then stop, book into a hotel and take full advantage of the £25 food and drink allowance for dinner. Then work from home the following day, as we had been away from home the previous day as per the policy. After about 8 weeks, we were called into a meeting with our line manager and debt manager about our expenses. Our expenses for the first month after the cars had been returned were more than they were for the previous 12 months combined. Our line manager agreed that our expenses were in line with the policy, otherwise he would not have signed them off. Then the department manager told us that we were getting company cars back and he expected the expenses to return to previous levels. We declined the offer of company cars and let management know we would be adhering to the travel policy to the letter. And yeah, ripe stars, if your company puts up stupid policies, then I guess a good way to get revenge on them is to engage in some kind of malicious compliance. Because honestly, in my opinion, revenge and malicious compliance stories are pretty closely related if you ask me. Anyway, I forgot to mention, if you enjoyed the story so far, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments, because that would really help me in regards to the algorithm. Anyway, the next one is a story from r/am-I-the-jerk, and it is titled, I built a fence to keep out trespassing neighbors. Earlier this year, I, 26 female, got an inheritance from a family member, and it was a godsend. I finally got to move out and get my own place after living paycheck to paycheck. My dream place. I could never get a place like this without Providence or cutting my way through the corporate ladder with a machete. But the most important part is the pool. I love it. I would swim every day if the weather let me. It has helped me get in great shape. The problem comes from the neighbors. Mark, fake name, and Kaylee, faker name but it's something like that, have 3 kids. Brad, 16 male, Chad, 14 male, and Leah, 11 female. They started out friendly enough, especially Kaylee, who's dripping with housewife yoga PTA energy. She told me about a week after I moved in over a plate of cookies that the prior owners of the house were an older couple who let her kids use the pool whenever they wanted because their kids were out of the house and they didn't like quiet. I, on the other hand, love quiet. I'm also introverted, I love my privacy. First thing I did when I moved in was put up curtains. I told her I was uncomfortable with that arrangement, but perhaps they could come over occasionally if they don't abuse the privilege. Cue the children abusing the privilege all summer. Every time I was out swimming, it would not be long before Chad and Brad would run over and jump in, followed by Leah with her floaties. And being teenage boys, they would always want to roughhouse or gape at me or my friends when we would get out of the pool and make gross comments. This would be tolerable if it happened once a week. They even brought friends a couple of times, and more than a couple of times I've had to tell them they need to leave because I was with adults doing adult things, aka drinking, etc. So anyway, I'm now putting up a fence for 2 reasons. Number 1, I'm getting a dog. Number 2, I want my privacy. Kaylee ran out of their house when she saw me and a couple of friends hammering in the fence and digging holes for privacy hatches. I made sure everything was within regulation and right on the property line. She said if I put up a fence it would be harder for her kids to come over and play. I said yep. She asked me if I was planning on putting a gate between our yards as well. I said nope. Finally she asked, a little choked up, if I was depriving her kids of our pool. Our pool? I told her how in the beginning I had said they could use the pool as long as they didn't abuse the privilege, and they did. I said now they can only come over if invited. She told me they were gonna be crushed and saw me as a big sister. I told her no teenage boy looks at their sister the way those boys looked at me and my friends. She took huge offense to that, and it might have been gross to hear, but so were the comments on my bikini from her boys. It's just too much. I'm not their babysitter and I have every right to my privacy, but some people have been saying the fence is too much and I'm gonna hurt the kids' feelings. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? And yeah, ripe stars, I would 100% say that OP is not the a-hole here, because the neighbor has no right to trespass on OP's property or swim in her pool whenever they want. Also, putting up a fence to prevent people from coming onto your property without permission is definitely not an a-hole move. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about this. A comment on Reddit said, not the a-hole, not at all. In fact, however high you were planning on building this fence, make it a foot higher. Comment number 2, not the a-hole, build it higher for that extra privacy. I would also install cameras in case those kids try to come over without permission. And yeah guys, that's certainly a good idea. Security cameras never hurt, and I don't think that you would regret having them. And to be honest, in a lot of these fence-related disputes between neighbors, one thing that many people don't even think about is when someone comes onto your property, especially kids or whatever, and they injure themselves, you might be liable for whatever happens to them. And obviously, no one would want that.
And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.